For the duration of the event, there was a strong feeling of terror in the room. This feeling was unfortunate, given that the ceremony had been arranged as a manner to commemorate and pay homage to those who had departed away. Its pitch was higher than anyone could have anticipated, and its arrival took everyone by surprise since it was a voice that no one had anticipated. Because of that, the quiet was abruptly and shockingly broken in a manner that came as a complete surprise to everyone. It appeared to be emanating from a location that was clearly situated in a place of total nothingness, based on the most up-to-date information it possessed at the time. The sermon that Tiffany Albright delivered at the church was so powerful that it had the same effect as a person striking another person in the face. The entire building could hear what she had to say. "Mother-in-law," she inquired with an unmistakable enthusiasm in her voice, "is it possible that the story is true? Can it really be true that you wore such a horrendous outfit to your husband's funeral?" Her words were rife with an unmistakable revulsion and rage at the subject that was currently being discussed. She assumed that I would find the joke that she told to be amusing, and she had told it to make me laugh. "You look like a pauper," she remarked, which made it clear that she was not only irritated by the circumstances but also felt uneasy about my presence. I was aware of the fact that the complete attention of every person who was in the room was directed toward me. All of the people were staring in my direction at the same time. I had the idea to wear a black dress that would give me an air of sophistication without being overly spectacular. This specific article of clothing was not in any way, shape, or form conspicuous, which is why I made the decision to wear it. In spite of the fact that the overall design was quite straightforward, it gave the impression of being magnificent. I believe it gave the place a welcoming atmosphere. At that particular point, I was unaware of what was really going on, and I also did not know that the piece of equipment was the source of amusement for other people. Because I was unaware that it was an issue, I did not give any thought to the clothes that I was wearing. "I am the wife of your son, and my name is Tiffany." I peered at you intensely, and I glanced over every inch of my body. I was overcome with an intense feeling that I could hardly contain. She made a comment in a tone full of derision about the low-cost clothing, not realizing that I had spent $80,000 on everything. Tiffany was completely in the dark about what was going on around her, and nobody who was in their right mind would have expected her to know any different. Her perspective on things was not the same as mine. Hers was quite different from mine because it was headed in the other direction from where I was looking. Her tendency to pay close attention to labels and price tags made it very clear that she was not well versed in the world of fashion or luxury. Her opinion on the concept of elegance was that the only aspect of it that was significant was that it was expensive. She decided to focus her attention on this one concept and make it the focal point of her thinking. The fact that I was the person who signed her paychecks at the store where she was employed was something that she did not realize. Ever since I have had such excellent hearing, I have been able to distinguish the voice of my son from those of others. He left no stone unturned in an effort to bring happiness to his wife. He directed his plea toward Marcus, his voice reverberating with both fear and sympathy simultaneously. "I implore you, Marcus," he said with insistence, but he was unable to convince him to alter his decision in any way. In an attempt to get his message over to them, he stated, "Our departure is imminent." He also informed Father that they would be departing soon so that he would be aware of it. He was putting effort into working toward his goal in order to prevent the situation from becoming more dire. Tiffany, on the other hand, had finally found an audience that appreciated her, and she was resolved to remain on the path that she had selected for herself from the very beginning. Her manner of speaking was so passionate that there was no room for any sort of disagreement. She said, "Someone has to say it." Her movements and her posture were reminiscent of an actor performing on a stage. Her demeanor was almost identical to that of an actor on stage. Marcus made a comment during his interview saying, "I have a great deal of experience with quality due to the fact that I have held employment at high-end retail establishments." "I don't have the slightest interest," she declared. After taking a cursory glance at my entire body and making a gesture with her finger that appeared to indicate, "Leave me alone," she continued. "Your mother is clueless about how she ought to behave. This is clearance rack material." I made no comments to indicate to her that I was mentally taking note of anything that she had just told me. I did everything in my power to prevent my hands from coming together in front of my torso and to keep my eyes cast downward. I did this so that it would appear as though I was giving her comments the consideration that they warranted, despite the fact that my hands were completely empty. I never once for a single second took my eyes off of her. I had to exercise all of the power that I have, and I also had to exercise a great deal of discipline in order to keep myself from saying anything. I did not make any progress until I dealt with both of these issues. I was behind her, but I was still able to make out the muffled noises that were being produced by Naomi and Candace, two of her companions. They were having a conversation with one another. At the same time, they were nodding their heads and listening to one another. I know this with absolute certainty. I seen it for myself. The folks who were around were aware of the palpable feeling of rage that was in the air. It began to spread among them in a manner that is reminiscent of the manner in which an infection propagates. During her outburst, Tiffany went into greater detail about the topics she discussed than she had done in any previous conversation, despite the fact that it had not yet reached its ultimate level of development. Her voice grew stronger with each word as she commented. It was a thoroughly atrocious ordeal for Elias to have to endure. The moment that I heard the words, "What an embarrassment for the whole family," my heart immediately started to pound, and the beating of my heart became increasingly intense. I was about to cry. The tears that were starting to well up in my eyes, though, weren't because I was sad. They were because of something else entirely. This is especially true when I think about how long ago he died and how strongly I feel that he is now turning over in his grave. His widow didn't even have the decency to dress appropriately for his send-off. This is never going to happen again. There is no possibility that it is going to happen. They were overcome with anger to the point that they were unable to contain it, therefore they broke down and cried. They did not cry as a result of any other emotion that may have provoked tears. On the same day that my husband was laid to rest, this woman decided to publicly humiliate me without giving it a second thought. Not only was it already a highly terrifying circumstance, but the fact that this calamity occurred on the same day as my spouse's burial made it significantly worse than it would have been in any other situation. The consequences of the action that she had taken had not been given any consideration by her prior to its execution. Tiffany started to say, "Ignore her completely," but she was interrupted before she could finish her sentence. Her intense dislike for what she was saying was tough to ignore. I was in the middle of a very intense argument, and I was struggling to manage my emotions because I really wanted to blow up. "As far as your mother is concerned, I believe you ought to give her a little bit of money so that she can purchase something nice for events such as this one," I began. "In the past I have said, she doesn't have the money to buy a decent dress." Tiffany would never be able to figure out what was going on with me, but I could feel myself beginning to smile. It would be necessary for her to be aware that I have ownership of over 200 expensive garments, every single one of which is stored in my closet. Furthermore, the amount of zeros in the balance of my bank account is greater than the number of days that are in a single year. I also have the pink slip that she signed sitting on my desk, just waiting for me to put my signature on it. Going to see her was something that she felt was of great significance. She held firm in her stance on the matter and continued to voice her opinions without showing any signs of backing down. Her tone got increasingly authoritarian and critical with every phrase that she said. Her remarks were so full of rage that it felt as though they were brimming with anger and poison. After sighing deeply, she stated, "What a horrible predicament Elias has found himself in." He would bring up the fact that he was always so concerned about her time and again. The fact that she would not be able to handle things without his assistance was something that he could not get over. The remarks that I happened to overhear without intending to did, it must be said, cause my heart to clench tightly into a ball. Despite the fact that everything I have heard on the situation is terrible, this remains the case. "That is something that he would say all the time," she stated, her voice expressing complete amazement. The words that escaped her lips were exceptionally painful. It was those statements in particular that caused me to feel so awful at the time. She was intentionally doing this. Her emotions got the better of her since she was so elated and satisfied. The events that were taking place in the vicinity were responsible for the way that she was feeling. As I was going through a sequence of stretches, I became aware of someone placing their hand on my arm. It was a soft and tender touch. It was Belle who stuck her hand in that same location. She maintained a voice that was gentle and silky while she spoke, and not for even a single moment did she vary the way in which she spoke. While I was on my way to the room where we are currently having this conversation, I had intentions of accomplishing 2 different tasks once I arrived there. I followed all of the instructions that my daughter gave to me when she filed in her appeal. I accomplished that very first thing. "Mother," she added, "you can disregard her, she is acting like a child." I had to leave the room as quickly as I could because I did not want Tiffany to cause any further harm to me with the poison that she had administered. I had this as my second option. Regardless of what has taken place, I have not made any contributions to the action that is the focus of the ongoing conflict. I was interested in learning more about the subject. The thought of seeing Tiffany's emotional breakdown filled me with great excitement. Reflecting on the prospect of listening to her while she investigated the depths of her own thoughts filled me with just as much happiness. There was not a single error in the environment, and every component of this ecosystem was flawless. When Tiffany turned her attention back to her husband, she made the following comment. "You know what, Marcus? When we have children, I hope that they do not turn out to be anything like your mother. She is absolutely basic," someone muttered. With a look of contempt, she looked at me and twisted her lips into a pitiable smile. "Look at her," she continued. "For such an important event, she doesn't even know how to dress. She isn't putting in any effort at all." Candace's companions started to giggle even more. It was impossible for Candace to keep her thoughts to herself. "I understand, Tiff. I too work in retail, and I don't think that dress could possibly have cost more than $100, I thought to myself at the time. I took a deep breath and made an effort to control my anger as it started to bubble up inside of me. They would be completely taken aback if they had the slightest idea of the events that actually took place. The buttons on this costume, for example, are regarded as being of low quality. Each of the buttons, which are manufactured from mother of pearl, has a price tag of $500. It seemed as though Tiffany had just won a significant victory, and she was radiating a smugness that made this impression. Happiness oozed from her voice as she stated, "Your statement is absolutely correct, Candace. I completely agree with you. For that very reason, I do not think she has sophistication," she continued. She did not know the identity of the person she was trifling with. I was familiar with the look on her face because it was filled with judgment and condemnation. On the other hand, she continued, her words and her conceitedness were only serving to strengthen my resolve in my decision. At the store where I work, we serve a clientele of discerning women who have an appreciation for true fashion and elegance. Tiffany continued to doggedly pursue her objective, and she made her normal impassioned plea, asking, "Please, Marcus. At this point in time, please ask your mother to refrain from making a spectacle of herself," she asked in an urgent manner. As she spoke, her voice was filled with malevolence, and the impact of her words reverberated throughout the room. Before anyone else had the opportunity to respond, she continued speaking, saying, "I mean, how embarrassing can it be to have a mother-in-law like that?" As everybody was staring at me, they were expecting me to lose my temper at any moment and were waiting for me to defend myself. However, I chose to remain silent in this particular situation. I gained some new information as a direct consequence of my decision to remain silent. Tiffany believed that she had the ability to make me feel embarrassed and that I was inferior to her, but she was completely unaware of the fact that her efforts had only just recently begun. Tiffany was the one who felt as though she was on the verge of being put in an embarrassing situation. She did not have knowledge of the actual state of affairs at the moment. I became increasingly cognizant that this outburst was not typical as Tiffany continued to speak at length. She was not simply releasing her frustrations. She was actually doing something much more significant than that. She was attacking me. She had my permission to make me look like a complete fool in front of everyone, and that is precisely what she was attempting to do. However, as she became further entrenched in this problem, I began to see the larger picture. I learned more about the real Tiffany with every passing second. I was certain that she had no knowledge of who I really was at the same time that she thought I had no knowledge of who she really was. Tiffany continued to make caustic comments, and the idea that she was in some way better than me gave her a tremendous degree of delight. After turning around, she continued to stare at Marcus without breaking eye contact. In my chest, I could feel a burning desire to do what is right, and the heat was nearly palpable. Her comments were less than nice. Nevertheless, they were not a match for the explosive wrath that was welling up inside of me, nor were they a match for the icy calmness that was beginning to take over. Her ignorance on the subject topic was total. She did not have any knowledge of it. Tiffany turned her insincere sweetness on full blast as she addressed Marcus, and asked him if he did not believe that the fact that his mother did not possess the slightest semblance of a sense of style was something that they should discuss and address. She expressed her views with such strong conviction that it appeared as though she had full authority to arrive at a judgment regarding the topic. "I am absolutely mortified," she declared. The hushed whispers that were emanating from the onlookers, the other individuals who were present in the room and who were witnessing the entire incident as it unfolded, were audible to me. I could see the feelings that they were experiencing written all over their faces. Tiffany's performance was met with mixed reactions. There were many who seemed like they were in a state of bewilderment, others who appeared to be uncomfortable, and sadly, there were also those who seemed to find enjoyment in her display. The atmosphere was saturated with nervousness to the point that it was almost possible to touch it. It is so close that you could practically stick your hand out and take a fistful. My hands were shaking, and my heart was pounding in my chest, but I was not feeling fear in the slightest, despite the fact that these symptoms are typically associated with it. This was not an instance of dread. It is not what this could have possibly been. I was making every effort to keep this tempest that was brewing within me from becoming too intense. I did not want to be the person who started a commotion. I was not interested in giving her such satisfaction. My game is the one that I was most excited to play. Tiffany kept looking at me the whole time she was talking. At first, she asked him to keep an eye on her, saying, "I would like you to observe her. It is absolutely clear that she does not have the slightest notion of how to dress appropriately for something as important as this. She does not have the faintest appreciation of what true sophistication actually means," she wrote in her statement to the media. For a little while, I almost let myself experience the pain that resulted from the things that she had uttered, since her voice was full of contempt. With that being said, I then remembered that I truly did have the ability to accomplish that, which was the case the vast majority of the time. I have never been deficient in terms of ability. I didn't really put it to use at any point. On the other hand, I found myself on the verge of carrying out that particular action at that precise instant in time. As soon as we have a family, I hope that our children will have role models that are better examples for them, Tiffany stated, her voice getting progressively louder with every second that passed. Tiffany did not take her eyes off of me at any point during the whole duration of her speech. She expressed her desire for him to keep a close eye on her from the very beginning with the statement, "I would like you to observe her." She continued, "It is absolutely clear that she does not have the slightest notion of how to dress appropriately for something as important as this. She does not have the faintest appreciation of what true sophistication actually means," she wrote in her statement to the media. I was on the verge of allowing myself to feel the anguish that stemmed from the words that she had spoken for a short period of time because her voice was dripping with disdain. I recalled at that point that I actually possessed the capability to execute that, which was the case for the overwhelming majority of the time. I have never been lacking in terms of skill. There was not a single moment when I put it to use. On the other hand, I discovered that I was on the edge of doing that particular action at that very moment in time. As soon as we are blessed with children, I have a hope that they will be able to look up to role models who are better examples for them, Tiffany said. Her voice grew stronger with each passing second. "Marcus, I cannot believe for a single second that you would want your children to look up to the kind of person your mother is. This is an aspect that is undeniably elementary in nature." After thinking about the fact that Tiffany and her friends were laughing hysterically, I genuinely thought about leaving the room for a little while. Based on what individuals were able to find out, it seems like her friends agreed with the harsh things she did. I thought of getting up from the room and going for a walk in the dark because it would make it much more likely that I could get away from her nasty words. Even though everything was in place, I had a strong feeling that I had to stay in that same position. I didn't feel like I had to go right away because I wasn't in a hurry to leave that situation behind and move on with my life. This time, I was determined to say what I thought before I went. I wasn't going to let it happen. As soon as she started talking to Marcus, she made a really theatrical gesture. It looked like she was ready to make the most important and damaging point in the whole argument. "Marcus, there is something I would like to talk about with you," she said at the start of the session. He then says something that demonstrates she doesn't know how to dress properly. He glares at me with his lips curled into a sneer of hate and anger in his eyes, and then he says, "Take a look at her." To start, he makes a comment that makes it clear that it is an embarrassing situation. She said, "If I ever had to raise the kids with your mother as an example, I would be very worried." She was giving me a full physical exam, starting at the top of my head and going all the way down to my toes to go along with this. As Tiffany spoke, I was able to sense the enthusiasm that she was exuding. Due to this, the temperature in the room began to rise rapidly. I pretended that the items she had prepared had a much more significant impact on me than they actually did, even though I maintained my composure and said nothing. I was aware that what was occurring at that very moment was merely the beginning of a long sequence of events that would take place in the future. She had gone much farther than she had originally thought she would need to go. As a result, she had gone beyond what would be considered acceptable behavior. The specific period that had already passed was the time when all of the events that had occurred had reached their apex. The content filters stopped the text from being generated. I saw him moving around a lot in his chair, and it looked like he was in a lot of discomfort because of it. He kept his hands in his lap and rolled them back and forth over and over again while standing in a certain way. He decided not to do anything to help me at all, and he thought that the best thing to do would be to be quiet and not say a word. He would have been less ready to do anything else on earth than to get engaged in this situation. He would have been better off if anything else had happened. He also didn't want to go against his wife's desires, especially since there were other people there at the time. After a long time, Marcus finally had the courage to say what he thought. His voice cracking showed how much work he had put into trying to make it look like he wasn't moving at all. It was hard to understand what he was trying to say since his voice was so rough when he added, "Tiffany, that is more than enough." Tiffany, on the other hand, had not yet gotten to the point in time when she could end her quest. When the subject came up, she answered in a tone of voice that was full of contempt. She told him that she really had to insist that he not try to come in her way, Marcus. And that's when she said what she said. People need to talk about some issues in a clear and honest way in order to solve them. She looked down on me, which made me think that she saw me as nothing more than a small problem that was getting in the way of her aspirations. She wrote in the mail she sent out, "There are some things that the general public should know." Her self-assurance protected her, which let me see how easily it worked on Marcus. The most amazing thing about the whole thing was how easily it could convince everyone. Tiffany's voice got stronger and louder as she started to talk. This made it look like she was talking to a huge crowd that already agreed with what she was saying. She said that clothes aren't the only thing that has value. After thinking about it, she made that choice. It's not just about how she looks. It's about the whole package. "Marcus, this is an embarrassment to our family. She doesn't care about how she looks." "Oh, Tiffany," I recall saying. I was in the middle of narrating the narrative when I added, "At that point, I was overcome with great feelings of hostility, and I was unable to keep myself from giving in to them. They compelled me to contort the corner of my mouth into a grimace." Despite the fact that she was completely oblivious to the truth of the circumstances in which she found herself, she said, "If you had even the slightest inkling that things were not as they should be at the moment." She did not realize that I was in the process of making significant changes to her life. Not only did she not know anything about the society she lived in, but she also didn't know that the things she thought were true would be shown to be wrong in only a few short moments. Tiffany firmly believed that the only way she could keep control over me was through her own words. She was also totally sure that she could have an effect on me. But she was about to find out that arguing with a woman like me is not a good idea. If she has the power to fully and utterly destroy you without even moving a muscle, then none of the reasons you give will be convincing at all. This isn't because she is so determined to build an empire that is bigger than anything you can imagine. I would go so far as to say that is more than enough, I stated in a voice that was flat and lacked any emotion, making me sound very distant and icy. Tiffany, from what I can tell, you have already said more than enough. The amazement that she experienced caused her eyes to widen, and her mood shifted dramatically. She was overcome with emotion in a way she had never experienced before in her life. The fact that she did not utter a single word indicates that she was utterly and completely incapable of saying anything. This appears to be the case because the manner in which I spoke to her changed so abruptly. She was unable to avoid the disaster that was approaching because the events that would culminate in it had already begun to unfold. Before that, she had put on a display of arrogance, self-confidence, and superiority. She made a small attempt to begin removing the mask. The events had already occurred before the game started. She was completely unaware of what had happened and did not have any understanding of how these events would affect her in the future. For a brief moment during our conversation, her face betrayed her true feelings. I recall the first time she looked at me with distrust after I spoke to her in a manner that was out of character for me. Her eyes were brimming with tears, and she appeared to be completely taken aback. I was not expecting Tiffany to be so forthright and honest with me. She did not think I would take a stand on my own because she believed I would do so on my own. After writing those words, I continued on and did everything that went against what had been suggested. There was a strong feeling of expectation. I played the part of the everyman, while Tiffany played the part of the villain. I slowly found my voice while I was in this really emotional place. I played at the church's full location. After waiting for a brief period of time, she opened her mouth as if she were about to say something. She then came to the realization that she did not possess the power to force the words out of her mouth. The actions that she took demonstrated that she was making a significant effort to fully comprehend the events that had just transpired. It is possible that she had the ability to see into the future enough to know that I would leave in disgrace, or she had the ability to see into the future enough to know that I would apologize for the clothes that I was wearing because she thought they gave the impression that I lacked a sense of style. Considering all of the circumstances that are taken into consideration, I am unable to think of a single situation in which this problem could manifest in this manner. This day of the month or this day of the week is not going to happen. Can guarantee that. I do not want to do that again in the future, and there is no way in the entire universe that I would ever do it again. After inhaling deeply, Tiffany appeared to have made a slight advancement in the domain of self-confidence that she had been attempting to improve. She then took a step forward and adjusted her posture so that her shoulders were parallel to the ground and aligned with one another. It seemed as though she was about to deliver the most conclusive and definitive blow of all. Or so it seemed. Can it really be that difficult to acknowledge the presence of a problem? Do you actually believe that humiliating me in front of all of these people is the correct course of action? She asked herself. Her voice was full with derision, and for a little moment, I saw her superiority complex resurface. I, on the other hand, did not feel the slightest bit frightened. She had gone too far, and I was not going to allow her get away with what she had done. I stated back to her exactly what she had said, without changing anything word for word. It seemed like I was making fun of her. Would you agree with me that, in this situation, everything else revolves around me? Are you trying to make me look like a complete idiot? You seem to be trying to make me think that I'm an idiot, which is obviously not how I feel, even if I think the chances of this being true are very high. I shook my head a little in response, and a faint smile of recognition began to emerge at the corners of my mouth. Tiffany, this is not the case in the slightest. You do not have any connection to this scenario in any way. This is directly linked to your steadfast conviction that there is absolutely no chance that you would be found responsible for any of the transgressions you perpetrated against me. You maintain the belief that this circumstance has a significant impact on you, which is a result of the fact that you work on the premise that you possess comprehensive and thorough knowledge of all of the information that there is to know about the subject matter. Regardless of how that may be, None of those things are something that you are aware of. Inside the chamber, not a single sound was emanating at that very instant in time. The visitors continued to chat to one another and to discuss matters with each other until they abruptly and oddly fell silent. They were spectators of the mounting dispute between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, which they watched unfold before their very eyes as it escalated from one level to the next. There was not a single instance or situation in which this created the sense that things were in any way similar to how they seemed to be. Everyone in the room was focused their attention on me, and I did not find this to be bothersome in the slightest. The completion of this assignment, which had been designed with the purpose of safeguarding my own interests and demonstrating to Tiffany and anybody else that the presumptions they had made about me were incorrect, led to the accomplishment of these objectives. I took sure to keep my composure and maintain a frosty tone when I told Tiffany, "It seems like you think I'm the weak and passive widow that you think I am. I do not wish to remain in the corner while you shout at me like a frightened old woman. You spent the whole time that I was waiting for an opportunity to humiliate and insult you by insulting me, and you chose not to defend yourself during this entire funeral." Tiffany's teeth grinding and jaw clenching were evident indications that she was feeling dissatisfied. I still believed that she was becoming somewhat irritated by this in the present moment. "You believe that you are superior to me simply because you have a greater amount of wealth," she replied. After that, she asked, "Is it really possible that you are unaware of the best way to utilize it?" In a manner that was courteous. "You give the impression that you do not regard your money as a precious resource and that you do not give it a second thought before spending it." Her tone of speech was disagreeable, and the things that she said to me were far from kind. On the other hand, I was not physically harmed by anything that she said. The fire that was already burning inside of me grew even larger and more intense as a result of the things that she said. I can unequivocally and undeniably demonstrate that the notion that I am in this position to provide evidence to her is absolutely without merit. There was no one on site who could defend me against any of the charges that she made against me because I was not there in person. As soon as I arrived at this place, I made the decision to deliver her a lesson that would be so impactful that it would remain with her until the day she passed away. The only noises that could be made out in the room were the sound of my heels tapping against the floor and the noise of my approach toward her. "As long as you approach this matter from a specific point of view, you are indeed on the right track," I said, making a deliberate decision to maintain a measured and controlled tone of voice. "There is no expectation that I will have to demonstrate perseverance in order to achieve my objective. Consequently, I have never previously had any experience working towards a goal in this fashion. I have devoted my entire life to the development of something that goes beyond all comparisons and is beyond the scope of the human imagination in terms of how excellent it is compared to anything else that could ever come into existence." Tiffany's expression shifted from one of bewilderment and astonishment to one of fury the moment that she switched topics. She made it a point to loudly declare that she was not a Titan, a Gemini, nor any other model for that matter. As she continued with the question, her voice began to tremble. "I am an artificial intelligence system that was developed by a group of inventors that were employed by Amazon," she explained to reporters. I was able to sense, on the other hand, that she was beginning to become frightened. At that very moment, I became aware of the fact that she had just discovered that she did not have a clue as to the identity of the individual to whom she was related. "I am going to make the presumption that knowledge of this matter is not in your possession. Is that assumption accurate?" I questioned him in response. I responded to him. "I truly apologize for leaving that out. I hope that it is not in any way inconvenient for you." I started with a voice that was full with mistrust and cynicism. "I would like to continue by providing you with some information." I continued to speak with a voice that was not only composed but also had a tone that was gentle yet assertive at the same time, all while I leaned in slightly. "The fact of the matter is that the amount of products that I own that might be considered designer merchandise far exceeds the total of 200 items that I currently have in my possession. The numerical value consists of only a small fraction of these components altogether. You are hired by me because the locations where you are presently working are retail shops that are owned and operated by me. That is the way that the situation actually stands. As stated in the declaration that I make to myself, it is my signature that appears on your paycheck, and I am the person who signs it. It is essential that you keep in mind that it is I who, from the very inception of this domain, established it while you were still preoccupied with making judgments about people based solely on the clothes that they wear. She became utterly out of control, and I watched her the whole time. She did it as I was observing every single one of her moves. In spite of the fact that there had been no changes in her, the woman who had a history of verbally abusing and criticizing me was plagued by thoughts of self-doubt. She remained just as cocky and completely confident in herself as she had been in the days preceding this one. After the occurrence occurred, the space was filled with a silence so deep that it could be characterized as deathlike. There were no noises of any type audible in the entire area. All of the thrill had vanished totally by that point in time. All of us were feeling the weight of the situation, which was really unpleasant. I was surprised by the rapid knowledge that the conditions were totally dreadful at that exact instant in time. Tiffany attempted to open and close her mouth in an effort to determine the words that she was looking for. Nevertheless, she was not able to get a single sentence out of her mouth in spite of her efforts. I was able to identify the exact point in time at which the pressures of the situation exceeded her ability to cope with them. She had been dealing with that individual in a way that was humiliating, giving the impression that the person did not possess any importance. In particular, she should have abstained from making any derogatory comments on this person in any situation, given that she did not have a comprehensive understanding of the circumstances. I would like to bring another matter to the table in order to make sure that there is no misunderstanding regarding my words, I continued to say with an unshakable self-assurance. Respect is another factor that needs to be taken into consideration. This circumstance includes components that cannot be accounted for by the simple acquisition of wealth alone. You turn me into the object of ridicule for every single person who was there within my immediate vicinity, and I would really appreciate it if you could provide me with an explanation as to why you engaged in such behavior. Is it actually possible for you to take charge of your own mental condition and improve it? Is it within your power to persuade yourself that you possess greater abilities than the folks who are in your immediate vicinity? I am aware of who you really are, and I have also arrived at the conclusion that the performance you produced was nothing short of ridiculous. Tiffany, you have been dismissed from your position, I told her. While she was processing the significance of the news that I had just delivered to her, I paid great attention to the reactions on her face. She needed a period of time to analyze and comprehend the information that I had just imparted to her. I have already informed the Human Resources Department about this, and they will be sending you a letter by mail informing you that you have been terminated effective immediately. You are allowed to continue to maintain all of the grandiose views that you may have regarding both your job at the high-end shop and the promotion that you obtained by means of fraud. On the other hand, you are not currently employed by me, and there is no chance that you will ever be employed by me again in the future. I will not tolerate this type of behavior within my organization in any way, shape, or form. My testimony is based on direct experience, since I can attest to the fact that I was there. Tiffany behaved in an atypical manner due to the fact that she was skeptical about whether or not the events in issue had actually taken place. Despite this, the words that had escaped from her lips continued to hover in the air around her. It was difficult to distinguish the word "no" from the rest of the words that she said since her voice was so quiet that it was hard to hear. I made the decision to continue on even though I could still hear Tiffany's cry for aid behind me. I made my exit from the situation by way of the door, leaving Tiffany behind me. She remained in exactly the same position and state of trance as she had been in previously. There was no way that she could convince me to change my mind about what I intended to do after I had settled on a course of action. Before entering through the door, I paused there for a moment to collect my thoughts. I picked up where I left off the moment I crossed the threshold and started speaking once again in a voice that was just as incisive as a razor blade. There is still one thing I want to talk about, I kept saying. If you ever want to embarrass someone, especially if there are many watching, you should think about this time. It is imperative that you keep in mind that you are not speaking to just anybody. This is a crucial detail that you should always have in the forefront of your thoughts. As I was driving away from Tiffany, I caught a brief glimpse of her in the rearview mirror. I abandoned her in the horrible predicament that she had landed herself in, and I walked away from her. As I proceeded to go down the corridor of the church, going further away from Tiffany, I began to feel the weight of everything that had just taken place. The sound of my footfalls reverberated throughout the region the moment that I took my strides. Very well then. Finally, I was able to release all of the wrath and rage that I had been suppressing within myself for such a long length of time after all of that had built up. After I had done it, I felt a tremendous sense of accomplishment. There was not even the faintest hint of embarrassment or remorse exhibited. Tiffany found out that she was in charge of dealing with the consequences of a string of events after she had decided to go beyond the boundaries that had been established. I adamantly refused to turn around and look at her. I continued to move away from her, and I could hear her screaming out to me and sobbing, even though her voice was beginning to sound faint. I was completely and utterly exempt from any sort of responsibility to engage in that specific form of behavior. There is no conceivable way that I could have been under any obligation to carry out that particular activity. I thought that I had an obligation to ensure that she was fully aware of the ramifications that her actions would have due to the fact that I had been informed of the kind of person she genuinely was in the past. When I came back, I realized that there had been a substantial transformation in the area around me. While I was gone, I had the definite feeling that something in the room had been altered. As soon as I returned, I could tell that the atmosphere was charged with electricity. I was no longer that defenseless widow who could be dismissed without making any attempt or protest. I had become far more agreeable and obedient than I had been at any time in the past. I was the person who occupied the position of power at that specific point in time. The moment that I entered the cool air, I was instantly overwhelmed with a powerful feeling of the gravity of the decision that I had just made. Clothing and the shame that had transpired during the burial were not the only things that were affected by this. This was related to a particular event that had a much greater influence than the one that had been described in the sentence that came before this one. There is a far stronger correlation between an attribute like the one that is being discussed here and the manner in which a person sees themselves. For an extended period of time, I prevented drawing attention to myself by making it a habit to reside in the shadows and to give up the limelight to other people whenever it was feasible. My children had not yet reached adulthood before I had the opportunity to give them a complete grasp of the family business, which I had put so much effort into creating. I kept the fact that I was affluent and influential a secret, but I did so for reasons other than feeling ashamed of those qualities in myself. On the opposite side of the spectrum, I am a staunch advocate for the idea that it is of the utmost importance for children to develop the ideals that are appropriate for them during the course of their upbringing. It is crucial to have a thorough understanding of the fact that money is an extremely significant part of the modern world. However, it is also vital to bear in mind that a person's worth cannot be quantified by the quantity of money they possess. As far as this circumstance was concerned, I did not have any other options accessible to me because Tiffany had decided to take a particular course of action. I had no intention of continuing to stay passive and do nothing while she continued to treat me as if I was nothing or to make a mockery of all the arduous effort that I had accomplished. While I was standing in the parking lot, my thoughts wandered over to my children, Belle and Marcus. They did not have a clue as to who I truly was as a person. They believed that their mother was just an average woman, no different from any other woman on the face of the earth. She never told them about any of the triumphs she had achieved, and her daily routine appeared to be mechanical. I thought that it was of the utmost importance to let them know the truth about our family and the heritage that their father and I had worked so hard to achieve. At that moment, they were oblivious to the fact that a force was laying dormant just beneath the surface. It was at that point in time that I decided that telling them the truth was my only option. I felt a sense of security wash over me the moment I settled down into the driver's seat of my 2015 Honda Civic, a vehicle that is not only fashionable but also boasts a black finish. I noticed that the stress that had been building up in my shoulders was gradually starting to subside as I continued on my journey down the road, traveling mile after mile. It may have kept the same look as the vehicle, but the automobile did not have anything that would cause any person to become excited in any way, which is the reason why it was just barely adequate. When the circumstance was taken into consideration, the matter of retaliation was no longer being given any thought. It was linked to having integrity and self-respect. The focal aspects of this experience were to be present in the life that I had made for myself and to be present for myself. I had placed limitations on myself as a result of the harsh words that Tiffany had said to me. Despite this, I was able to transcend these self-imposed boundaries. That moment when those words were uttered is what is known as the moment of truth, or as it is more generally referred to, the point of no return. I ended up parking my car and sat there for a little while when I arrived at my flat and took a look at the building. When I was feeling overburdened by everything and everyone around me, this was my sanctuary. In the past, I would come to this place to get out of the rain. It was not only a location where I could find peace and quiet, but it also reminded me of all the feelings and memories that I had hidden deep inside. I have concealed the actual scope of my accomplishments from everyone, including my own children. They had arrived at a stage at which it was very imperative for them to begin acquiring new skills. The decorations and furnishings of the flat were chosen with a refined and developed palette in mind, despite the fact that they were plain and inconspicuous. At the time that the property was sold, its measurements were typical in size. I entered the room on foot. There is nothing that is in the slightest bit flashy or gaudy, and nothing is unreasonable in the slightest. This can be said with complete certainty. Just enough to convey the idea that I was leading a straightforward existence that did not include any difficulties or issues whatsoever. I kicked off my shoes as soon as I stepped into the kitchen, getting rid of the $12,000 heels that had been the object of so much derision earlier on that day. I poured a glass of wine for myself. Every bottle of the Bordeaux from the previous year's harvest had a suggested retail price of $5,000. The taste was reminiscent of velvet in the sense that it had a sumptuously rich and velvety consistency. I was able to feel a feeling of peace seep into every inch of my body as I took gentle sips of the liquid. For an extensive amount of time, I was eagerly anticipating the arrival of this particular event in time. The precise moment in time at which I would take full responsibility for the narrative that is my own life while I was in the process of coming up with fresh ideas, I was utterly taken aback when my phone, which was sitting on the counter, started to vibrate. My daughter Belle was the one who called. "I'm so sorry for everything that happened today, Mother," she stated in response. According to her, Tiffany has been behaving in a manner that is not at all appropriate. As she informed me of the events that had taken place throughout the course of the day, her words were filled with concern. She was unaware of the fact that she did not know what she was talking about. I was able to sense the frustration that she was feeling just beneath the surface. I did not require anyone to inform me of what was going on, since I was already aware of everything that had transpired, which is a whole story in and of itself. "It's simply a matter of being true to herself," I responded, doing my best to keep my voice as level and composed as possible. "There is nothing that should cause you to worry, my love," I reiterated once again. Despite the fact that I felt like there was nothing wrong with me, I was fully aware that I was not well at all. "I am okay," I declared. "I swear to you." On the other hand, I was making progress. Tiffany is simply... Belle's query was posed in such a manner that it became apparent that she would not be satisfied with any response other than an answer. She was waiting to see whether the person to whom she was posing the question would take action over the behavior that she was exhibiting or whether they would remain idle and allow it to go place. I had a smile on my face as I looked across at him, well aware that the anguish that she was experiencing was the direct consequence of the actions that I had committed. I, conversely, did not experience any feelings of anxiety whatsoever. The written text was prevented from being posted due to the presence of content filters. With unwavering conviction, I declared, "I am not going to do that. There is no possibility that it will ever occur in any way or at any time, and there is no conceivable way to offer a counterargument to this. I, on the other hand, want to deal with the matter in a manner that I believe to be the most effective. My health and well-being are not things that you need to be concerned about. I am doing all right." I walked to the room that I refer to as my study once I had ended my conversation on the telephone. This room was unknown to anyone else. With the naked eye, it was hard to notice because the only way to access it was through a hidden door that was behind a bookcase. All of my personnel information, business contracts, and store financial data are stored in this room. Additionally, it was at this location that I kept secrets regarding my rule. I approached the desk and took a seat in one of the chairs. I began investigating her history by placing my fingers on the keys of the keyboard. I discovered that she had received 3 warnings for arriving late to work, 2 complaints from customers over her impoliteness, and a report from her supervisor that brought attention to her extremely disrespectful behavior. I employed the technique of opening the file that included information about Tiffany in order to access her employee file. The next document that I accessed was a performance review that had been submitted 2 weeks prior to the present date. Tiffany was skating on a surface of ice that she was aware would most certainly break if she remained on it for an extended period of time. Tiffany had made a huge blunder when I was in the middle of developing a strategy. I leaned back in my chair so that I could take a moment to focus on the actions that I was currently performing. When it came to my capabilities, her judgment of them was seriously inadequate on a large scale. Tiffany not only believed that she possessed the ability to embarrass me, but she also thought that she had the ability to make me look like a fool in front of the members of my family. However, she was absolutely unaware of the fact that I possessed a capability that was substantially more powerful than anything she had ever considered feasible. I dialed the number of Janice, the head of the Human Resources Department, and gave her a call after lifting the receiver of the telephone. "Janice, I need you to do something for me," I said to Janice in a voice that was both frosty and determined. "I would be grateful if you could send me an email with a copy of the entire report. Over the past 6 months, I would like you to look into the performance of Tiffany Albright. Any difficulties that develop that could potentially be used against her, including challenges relative to her performance or any prospective disciplinary procedures that could be taken against her." She made it clear to Ms. Coleman that there is no room for debate when it comes to this particular matter. Furthermore, she declared, "I'm going to begin working on it immediately," before Janice could even take a single breath. I experienced an intense and immediate feeling of gratification the moment that I returned the phone to its holder. They had reached a stage where these things were already able to take place prior to the time that they altered. They have transitioned from being events that were anticipated to occur in the future to events that have already taken place in the past. Tiffany was unaware that circumstances would eventually compel her to participate in the events that would occur in the future. To summarize, what is the most critical thing that you should keep in mind? All of her opportunities for the future had been completely destroyed as a result of the decisions that she had made in the past. Regardless, there is no way that she could have been aware of this fact. Additionally, she was unable to determine whether or not the events that were unfolding were genuine. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending us super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.